Hello and welcome to the Series B podcast. I'm your host, Greg Pokricki. Your guest today is Jon DeWald, co-founder of HelixIntel, a property tech startup growing quickly right here in Buffalo. We talk about the company, its latest edition of Helix Prevent, innovating in such a highly regulated industry, and Jon's path from the Marines to startup founder. Enjoy. All right, Jon, thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time.
That's great. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So for the uninitiated, what does HelixIntel do? And tell us about what you just launched in Helix Prevent.
Yeah. So, at HelixIntel, our mission is really to help the operation and maintenance teams of facilities execute on their job, primarily by, removing a lot of the costs that they traditionally have, and then empowering them to really take action. And I know it's a lot of buzzwords, but, what do we do and how do we go about it is, you think about the day-to-day life of any maintenance person. They're responsible for a lot of things. And that could be, preventive maintenance, work orders, responding to requests from, if you're school teachers, right? Apartment building could be the tenants and so on. And then you just layer on a whole lot of other things, planning, capital projects planning, asset management. We could sit here all day and talk about the different things they do. But historically, that's been done in either a single large operating system or it's been done through multiple different applications themselves, depending on the scale of the entity that you're dealing with. And what we've been able to do is build a business model within the insurance space where they subsidize some or all of those platforms, right? And, there's obviously one, they want to help their policyholders. That's important to insurers. But the second is self-interested around, we got to reduce claims, right? On the insurance side, claims is a huge problem. If you were to kind of look at the industry itself and what's happening, the growth rate of claims is outpacing a lot of the premium growth. And so they're trying to get ahead of that. And so what we do is we bring the insurers to the policyholders, subsidize the tools that help them run the day-to-day operations. Obviously, when you have a tool that helps you run it, you're a better risk, right? Digitizing from pen and paper is a huge win for the insurer. But then ultimately, and you mentioned Helix Prevent, what we're building there is the analytical engine that helps the insurer and the policyholder understand, what's going on at a property, specifically around risks that they see or really risks that are, that are covered by the insurer. And then ultimately, what can they do to help go and alleviate them? It starts with data first. And so we focused on building, the ingestion engine. And we have a system, an operating system that properties use, but we also partner with other third parties, bring it all in, bring them to Helix Prevent, and then ideally help policyholders, provide a path to managing their facility more effectively.
Yeah. So you've spent, years inside of like a really heavily regulated industry. And I assume have a pretty strong perspective through your work at HelixIntel on where it's headed, right? And you kind of touched on that a little bit in your answer on claims outpacing premiums and just how some of the math is changing within that industry, next to some of those regulations. Talk to us just broadly, like if you could zoom out about the shift from paying for losses versus paying for prevention, right? Because at the core of it, that's what we're talking about with Helix.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just put on my years of working in the property operations and maintenance industry, construction. And what I can tell you is, there is a massive, right? Why do claims go up, right? Because you have a problem that eventually festers and turns into a claim. And the metric that we track, everyone should track, is deferred maintenance, right? Because deferred maintenance is kicking the can down the road and saying, hey, I'll get to it. And in the United States, so just the US, we hit 9.1 trillion in deferred maintenance right now. And this is a widely acceptable number. And it is growing at a rate that outpaces claims. It outpaces everything, right? And there's a direct correlation to the two. And so when you look at these industries, right, and you say, especially in the insurance space, and I've come up through the utility space, the federal procurement industry, all these, turns out I like to play in regulated spaces. Insurance is very similar to them, but you really need to have a driving mechanism, right, to get them to move. And so having deferred maintenance, which is the precursor to a claim, right, which then results in the insurance industry having to spend money in the most expensive way you could ever imagine to resolve a problem, because you're dealing with compounding issues when a claim happens. Um, and so when you think about all of that together, what that means is that the insurance industry has no choice but to get involved. They have to support proactively. And predict and prevent means being able to identify where it is, where a problem will be, where it could be, and then what does it take to alleviate it. And I think this is things that we're still learning, right? Because we focused heavily on how do you get the system to work? How do you get everyone to participate and play in this business model, right? And so it's taken us several years to get there. We're now at a position where we've got a really good handle on it, and we're trying to scale it now across the country and eventually throughout the world. And when you look at the insurance companies themselves, when you look at those policyholders, being able to bring them into one place, show them, right? Show them actually what this impact will mean. Not only does it help the insurer, but I think this is, and going back to my earlier statement, this is the moment that every maintenance person has been asking for forever. Because when you look at 9.1 trillion deferred maintenance, right? Part of it is people don't have the capital to go right now and invest in dealing with it. But a large portion of it is maintenance teams, facility directors, have always struggled to get approval to do the work at a property, right? And it could be like a lighting infrastructure upgrade all the way to, a whole blown, central plant. Whatever it is, getting that capital out of the hands of the CFO, right? Whose their job is to focus on revenue growth, right? What is not revenue growth, but let's call it revenue enablement, is running the facility maintenance. But being able to go back to them and tell the story and say, hey, here's what's happening. And oh, by the way, right, not only is this a problem, is this a problem for us, but it's a problem for our insurer. And here are the things that they want to do that are going to help us. The first thing always is obviously providing the software or subsidizing it. That in itself is a home run. It's something I've been focused on since I started this company. But then eventually it will result in, here are the things you can do to make an impact on risk at your property. And whether that be a financial impact to you from the insurer, whether that be them providing additional support and resources, there will be support that will be given in a way that the operations and maintenance teams haven't had. And to me, that is the most important thing in the whole industry right now. Because once we solve that problem, the deferred maintenance, right? By the way, it's right around 100 trillion globally, right? So this is a global problem. And when you tackle that, the just risk comes down substantially.
I'm interested in your personal story, how you came to found a company kind of in this niche. I mean, I know you're a Marine veteran and you spoke a little bit about your experience in some of these adjacent industries that Helix is now serving, but tell our audience like how you got into this, how you founded HelixIntel.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I technically, like you said, so I'm from Buffalo and then joined the Marine Corps right after high school. And this is right around 9/11. And, the time I spent there, quite a bit of it over in the Middle East, and had a lot of experiences, really taught me quite a bit about, getting the mission accomplished, never giving up. We could talk for hours about that, maybe different time. But that experience led me to kind of, led me to learn to go after it and to try to take charge and do my own thing. And so when I got out and I started going to college, I knew I wanted to do something that I could kind of run my own destiny on. You layer in, this is like right around 2007, 8 timeframe. President Obama was just coming into office, and I was trying to think about what I want to do. I was a freshman working through it all. And he was talking about energy efficiency and, the impacts that the climate is having. And for me, I wanted to, that spoke to me. And so I started my first company in college as what we call an energy services company, going around and figuring out how to, reduce electrical bills by reducing, the cost of energy coming through and all the things that happen in that. And from that, it just kind of streamed into other businesses that I've built, one after another, all in the in the property space, this we call proptech, cleantech. But in that space, that's where I've come out of, and so the journey I've been on was just one building block after another to get to where I am today, and they're very fortunate. I also, I got an incredible team in every company that I've worked with. Been very fortunate to have really dedicated individuals who, see the mission. We build it together. There's four other co-founders of HelixIntel, several of them that are in the Buffalo area that, we wouldn't be here without them. So very grateful.
Awesome. And on that note, I mean, you could have built Helix really anywhere, right? And you talked in some of those numbers that you're addressing about just how national and global this problem is. Like
Hmm.
the problem is huge and the potential market is huge, but you built this
Hmm.
company like right here in Buffalo, New York, and have continued to grow it from Buffalo. Um, why is that? Like, what made you stay?
You know, the first thing when I set out to build this, the first thing was I thought through, just what I was going to build, the problem I was trying to solve. And I should say, I would start with the problem, right? Because you don't have a good problem and you feel like it's not something you want to commit your life to for however long, it's definitely not worth it. So it's going to be way too much pain. But so so setting out to solve the problem of helping the maintenance teams, reducing costs, things like that. I was trying to think of, where, like, what I needed to do and who are the resources, who are the people, where are the resources. And, because I'm from Buffalo, I'm, at the time I was living in Northern Virginia, but constantly back and forth. That's where I really spoke with my sister, who, she's an entrepreneur herself. And was talking to her about the concept I had. Her husband and I chatted. He comes from the tech space, and then I was introduced to, I would say, like the key person, Peter Burkowski. And I don't know if you're familiar with him,
Oh
but
yeah.
he's a man about town. Obviously, core to 43 North, and then has gone out to do incredible things for Buffalo and continues to do. And in talking with him, and him explaining all the resources and what's happening in Buffalo, I was like, oh, this is absolutely a no brainer. And, at the time I was like, oh, maybe I can get into 43 North, all these different things. But I think the key thing was the tech community that was built, the success that they were starting to realize from ACV auctions, which you can't understate how important that is, right? Because if building a company is one execution, the other need is capital. And I could tell you, having ACV go public did more for our community than anyone can imagine in the startup scene, because it's that risk is gone of, can you do this in Buffalo? Now you have something to point to, right? You layer in what 43 North did. All those things are what drew me there, are what keeping me there. And so, I feel the weight sometimes because so many incredible people have done so much for our community, and myself, and there's a lot of other founders and other companies who are working to realize the same dream.
Yeah. And it's interesting. There's like a cluster of insurance and insurtech type of companies here in
Mm.
Buffalo. Um, I'm wondering why you think, beyond like the ecosystem support, not just start a startup, but maybe a company or a startup within insurtech. Like, why do you think that's happening specifically, and who else around the ecosystem do you think is to potentially credit for that?
Yeah. Well, there is several people, I think, in the Buffalo ecosystem that you could credit to to it. Um, that's a great question. I would first start with, there's a company called Loss Control 360. And if you guys are familiar with them, they're founded out of Buffalo. They're pretty much the preeminent risk management software in in the ecosystem. You combine that with, um, the team that founded and built that out. The I think Majesco is another company here, and so there's or a team that's here, right? So there's these huge companies who, like, early on found a niche. How they got there, you're talking about really smart people. I've had the opportunity to spend some time with the founder, Pat, and, like, just incredibly intelligent and really knows the space, um, layered in with software experience. So I think, like, having that foundation, you just have a community who knows it, right? And so, like, when you are in the space, you want to improve the space is always how I look at companies in general. And then when you layer in, um, what is Buffalo, right? And I know people talk about being like blue collar, or, people who like to just get it done, get their hands dirty and do what it takes. I think a lot of that plays into the insurance space, because we did not start here, right? We were setting out to solve a problem. We were introduced to insurance, and it turns out that's how you solve this problem. But insurance touches everything, right? There is not a industry that doesn't have insurance. It's something that when I've learned the depths of it, and I'm working on my master's degree in it right now. We're 5 years in. Eventually, hopefully, get my doctorate. My mom will be proud. And then but it's learning the space and is one aspect, and then having all these companies who specialize in these really unique things like maintenance, like other industries. And when the two hang out together and when they talk, you realize the similarities, and that me doing one thing over here, which is better maintaining a building, which maintenance people are trying to figure out all day, but that helps the insurer, right? And when you put those two together, it's kind of incredible.
Yeah. So I know for Helix specifically, a lot is changing at the company. You guys are growing pretty significantly. We've documented some of that in Series B, and I'm curious if you could walk us through some of the evolution that you've seen, through launching Helix Prevent, and just some of the growth through, hiring, fundraising, all of that. Like, what's the good news people need to know about your trajectory here?
Yeah. No, that, you're spot on that. We're definitely realizing a growth moment. And it's funny because the insurance industry is one of those industries that, because I think they're heavily regulated, and because the business model um, is being challenged in certain ways, right? It's one that they move very slow, deliberately, right? And actually, one of my favorite quotes is from a company, and some colleagues at Siemens who are like, "Hey, John, we've been around for I think like 103 years, some long period of time," and they're like, uh, we're around that long because we take our time to make sure we're doing the right things right." One of our
Yeah.
partners, Harvard Steam Boiler, on the insurance side, tiered with Munich Reinsurance, and they were early investor and helped us get going. Um, HSB's been around for like 150 years or 160, something like that. So these are like super, what's called longevity in business, which is incredibly impressive, right? They withstand all the pressures to get wiped out at some point. And so, taking when you work with a mindset of you take one step at a time and you just make sure you're providing value, and you don't have to do it all at once, but you have the vision, the mission, right? Which the insurers and like, how can you work together to reduce risk and reduce cost? And when everyone sees that and feels it, then you'll take the steps to get to success. And, and so for us, when we took years to figure this all out, because it's not only the product, but it's the contractual relationships, right? The legal structure, the framework. Insurance is regulated not only federally, but at the state, right? I mean, it's just so many different pieces you need to play in. And when you can get all of those moving in the right direction, right? Now you can have fun. And that's where we are, right? And we're very fortunate that now we're at the position where we've got incredible companies that we're working with, like Marsh McLennan and Gallagher and Hanover Insurance and Secura and others, right, who have billion-dollar books of business, and how can you impact it? And so for us, that means that we have an opportunity to take our contract, scale it massively, right? Make sure that the value is being provided while you're doing it, because these are technically right enterprise contracts at the end of the day. Um, but then when you deliver that, not only is it a wonderful thing for you, for the team, for the company, obviously, most importantly, the customers you're servicing, but that allows you to take the right steps to scale the company as well.
Yeah. I'm curious, if you look out 5 years, what success might look like for Helix and also Buffalo's startup ecosystem. And I want to combine those because I think they're somewhat intertwined, maybe.
Yeah. 5 years out, world domination. No, it is,
Yep.
I would say this is how I look at it, right? The everyone in our company is super focused on one thing, and that is making sure that this business model is scaling and that it's delivering value. And as long as we do those two things, right, we'll be successful. Because for us as individuals, this is mission critical, right? And a lot of folks, you want to build companies, right? And sometimes people want to do it because they want to just do something on their own. Sometimes they want to amass a lot of capital and or power or something like that. Um, but I believe you don't have the mission and you don't have that vision set out so that people can viscerally understand it and want to execute on it, then when the times get tough, you're not gonna be successful, and you won't take that extra gear to find that path forward. Um, and so, you know, what we as a company feel is success to us is that this is delivered to help the maintenance people, right? That's why we are doing it all. Will we reap other benefits as any startup does, as any one of our team members or investors? Of course, right? At the end of the day, and I tell this to many startup founders, the moment you take capital, your job is to give that investor a return on that investment. That's it, right? That is the deal between their cash and you taking it and building your company. Now, there's all the steps to get in between to get there, but that's the job. And so what that means is, we've been at this for 6 years. At some point, we'll realize a path forward, and whether that is, an IPO or some public offering, whether that is a transaction, which is way more likely, right? If you look at just the path of most companies, usually it's an acquisition, and the one that I'm typically around. If we go public, I'll probably not the CEO to be here at that end. I'll champion a sign as we're closing deals. But I would say, for us, like I said, there's a lot of opportunity. We know where it's going, and deals present themselves to us frequently. But it's just really executing and providing the value, and everyone's pretty fulfilled with that.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate your time here on the podcast and everything you and the entire Helix team is doing for the ecosystem here. It's just been awesome to see you guys keep growing and picking up steam. So really, really appreciate it. Before I let you go, we always end on a couple hard-hitting questions we call our last call round, which in Buffalo is at 4 a.m. So first question, what is your favorite productivity tool?
Oh, man. Can I say two? I'm going to go.
Yes.
All right. Gone. Big fan from a sales perspective. And then honestly, and this is probably everyone, but just Claude is incredible. And so between the two of them, we are big fans.
Yep. So you're a guest on a podcast right now. When you listen to podcasts or audiobooks, what speed are you listening?
I listen to it normal speed, just one. I've tried them all,
Normal.
but at the end of the day, I like to listen to it once, read a book once, right? I ingest it, I learn from it, and then I move on. So I like to give the courtesy of the time that they put into it to myself. What that also means is that I actually don't listen to any podcasts that I've been on because I lived it and I move on to the next thing.
Fair enough. Yeah, we lost a listener in you for this episode. What's your go-to coffee shop order?
Okay, so I've actually only had a cup of coffee once in my life, and it was literally after we just wrapped up the Battle of Fallujah, and my sergeant major walked over to me, and I was a machine gunner on top of his Humvee at the time, and he handed me a homemade cup of coffee and was like, "Corporal DeWald, you got to drink this with me." Now, he made this himself, and we were just in battle for several weeks, so I don't know where he got it from. And when I tell you how bad this coffee was, it wouldn't even do justice to how bad it was. But this is the sergeant major of the battalion, so there's no choice. And I sat there and drank it with him. And so that was my only cup. And so I guess my story is I like tea occasionally, but my coffee experience was once, and I will never have it again.
That is a memorable cup of coffee there.
Truly.
Two more for you. What's a book or TV show that you'd recommend to our audience?
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, I just started reading a book right now that I think is going to be super important. And I don't know if you could see it. I'll tell you what. So it's Insuring States in an Uncertain World by Lewis Pauly. Full disclosure, he's my uncle. And in some weird world, he is the chair of the econ department at University of Toronto, as well as, worked for IMF and in the space, just wrote a book on insurance. And so talking about the problems that they're facing and what we're trying to solve, and we didn't collaborate. And so one, I would recommend everyone read that book. But I would tell you um, my favorite TV show. I don't watch too many TV shows. I listen to a lot of podcasts and informational ones at best.
We could
Oh,
take
I
a
don't have a good answer
podcast.
for you. Yeah. All right. So I probably have one that I would recommend going back. It's the BG2 podcast. They no longer do it, unfortunately, but extremely information gathering in that one. I know a lot of tech founders listen, probably like All In podcasts and those guys. I think those are super helpful just to get a good vibe. Um, and then I don't know, I just kind of go all over the place. Although I tell you, my news comes from the Breaking Points podcast. We get a little of everything on it. So
All right, awesome. We got a handful of recommendations there.
yeah.
And then last question, Buffalo podcast, we have to ask, chicken wings, drumstick or flat?
Drumstick. Of course. What are
Great
you, Greg?
choice. Drumstick.
Drumstick?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. It's the way to go.
Awesome. All right. Well, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for hopping on with us.
You too. Thank you.